"You're pathetic," her husband Marcus snarled, his face contorted with rage. "My mother was right about you. White trash who got lucky." Emma's hands trembled as she pressed herself against the kitchen counter, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the worst time. But it was the first time their 4-year-old daughter Sophie had witnessed it from the doorway, her tiny hands clutching her stuffed rabbit, her wide blue eyes filling with tears that matched her mother's. "Daddy?" Sophie's small voice cut through the tension like a knife. Marcus spun around, his expression shifting from fury to forced charm in an instant. "Go back to bed, Princess. Daddy and Mommy are just talking." But Sophie didn't move. She looked at her mother, at the broken glass scattered across the floor, at the red mark already forming on Emma's cheek where Marcus had grabbed her face moments before. Why is Mommy always crying? The question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Emma felt something break inside her chest, something that had nothing to do with the bruises hidden beneath her long sleeves, or the fear that had become her constant companion. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I said, go to bed." "Why is Mommy always crying?" Sophie asked again, her voice smaller now, frightened. Emma found her voice, though it shook. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's fine. Let's get you back to bed." She moved toward her daughter, but Marcus's hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to make her gasp. "She asked me a question. Don't you dare undermine me in front of our daughter." The doorbell rang. They all froze. It was past 11 at night. No one just dropped by this late, especially not to their upscale neighborhood where people minded their own business behind their manicured hedges and security systems. The doorbell rang again, followed by a firm knock. Marcus released Emma's wrist, his face flushing with irritation. "If it's those kids selling cookies again, I swear." He stalked to the front door and yanked it open. "What?" Emma couldn't see who stood on the other side, but she heard the voice. Deep, calm, with an edge of authority that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Marcus Hayes? Who's asking?" "My name is Roman Volkov. I'm a business associate of your father's. May I come in?" Emma's stomach dropped. She knew that name. Everyone in their social circle knew that name, even if they only whispered it at charity galas and country club dinners. Roman Volkov wasn't just wealthy. He wasn't just powerful. He was dangerous in ways that made people like her husband, men who built their confidence on intimidating their wives, look like children playing dress-up. "It's late," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Can this wait until tomorrow?" No. There was no threat in the word, no raised voice, but Marcus stepped back and opened the door wider. Emma quickly scooped Sophie into her arms, turning away to shield her daughter from whoever was entering their home, her mind racing. Why would someone like Roman Volkov be here? Her father-in-law handled real estate development, legitimate business as far as she knew. Unless... "Mommy, you're squeezing too tight," Sophie whispered. Emma loosened her grip, pressing a kiss to her daughter's soft hair. "Sorry. Baby." Footsteps approached. Emma turned slowly, still holding Sophie, and found herself looking at a man who seemed to draw all the air from the room. Roman Volkov was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair and eyes so pale gray they looked almost silver in the dim light. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, but it was the way he carried himself that struck her, perfectly controlled, like a predator who knew exactly how dangerous he was, and felt no need to prove it. His gaze swept the room, taking in the broken vase, the glass scattered across the floor, and then landed on Emma. On her face. On the mark that was darkening into a bruise. Something flickered in those cold eyes. Something that made her breath catch. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice softer now. "Perhaps you should put your daughter to bed." It wasn't a suggestion. Marcus opened his mouth to object, but Roman's attention shifted to him, and whatever Marcus saw in that look made him close his mouth again. Emma nodded quickly and carried Sophie toward the stairs. As she climbed, she heard Marcus trying to recover his bravado. "Look, I don't know what my father told you, but your father told me nothing. I'm not here about him." Emma paused at the top of the stairs, her heart pounding. If he wasn't here about her father-in-law's business, then why? "Mommy, I'm scared," Sophie whispered against her neck. "I know, sweetheart. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay." She didn't know if she was lying. In Sophie's room, Emma tucked her daughter into bed, smoothing back her blonde curls. Sophie's eyes, so like Emma's own, searched her face. "Mommy, why do you cry?" Emma's throat tightened. She'd tried so hard to hide it, to wait until Sophie was asleep or at preschool, to muffle her sobs in the shower where the water would drown out the sound. But children saw everything. They always did. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad," Emma said softly. "But it's not your job to worry about Mommy, okay? I'm the mommy. I worry about you." But who worries about you? The question was so simple, so devastating that Emma had to blink back tears. "I'm fine, baby. I promise." "Is that man going to hurt Daddy?" Emma's blood ran cold. "What?" No, sweetie. They're just talking about business." But Sophie's eyes were knowing beyond her years. "I hope he does. I hope he makes Daddy stop being mean." "Sophie, I'm not stupid, Mommy. I know Daddy hurts you." "I hear you crying at night." Emma felt like she'd been punched in the chest. She gathered her daughter close, breathing in her familiar scent of baby shampoo and innocence that was being stolen too soon. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, baby." She stayed with Sophie until her daughter's breathing evened out in sleep, then forced herself to go back downstairs. She expected to find Marcus and Roman still in the living room, expected raised voices or tense negotiation. Instead, she found Marcus alone, slumped on the couch, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly as he poured himself a drink. "Where?" she started. "He left." Marcus downed the whiskey in one gulp. "And you need to stay away from him." "I don't even know him." "Why would—" "Because that's what he does." Marcus's voice was sharp with something that sounded almost like fear. "He finds weaknesses and exploits them. He ruins people. And apparently he's decided to take an interest in our family. What does he want?" "Nothing. Yet. But men like that don't show up at your door for no reason." Marcus poured another drink, not looking at her. "I need to call my father." Emma stood in the doorway, her mind spinning. She should feel afraid. She should be worried about what Roman Volkov's appearance meant for their family. But all she could think about was the way he'd looked at her bruise, the way something had shifted in his expression, the way he'd sent her upstairs with Sophie as if he understood without being told that she needed distance from Marcus, and the way Marcus was scared of him. She'd never seen her husband scared before. The next morning, Emma dropped Sophie off at preschool with a forced smile and drove to the grocery store she always used, her mind still tangled in confusion from the night before. She was comparing prices on chicken breast because Marcus tracked every penny she spent while thinking nothing of dropping thousands at the golf club, when a voice spoke behind her. "The organic is better." She jumped, her hand flying to her chest as she spun around. Roman Volkov stood there, dressed more casually today in dark jeans and a black sweater that probably still cost a fortune, his pale eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to step back and lean closer at the same time. What are you doing here?" The words came out sharper than she intended, born of fear and confusion, and the strange, unsettling way her pulse had kicked up at the sight of him. "Shopping." He gestured to the basket in his hand, which contained precisely 3 items: a bottle of wine, fresh basil, and San Marzano tomatoes. "I'm making dinner." "You cook?" "I do many things that might surprise you, Mrs. Hayes." The way he said her name, formal and careful, made her acutely aware that she was still Mrs. Hayes, still Marcus's wife, still trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing her spirit, even as it kept her daughter fed and housed and safe. "Mr. Volkov." "Roman." "Roman." His name felt strange on her tongue. intimate in a way that made her nervous. "Why were you at my house last night?" He studied her for a long moment, and Emma had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing more than she wanted to show. The careful makeup covering the bruise, the long sleeves hiding fingerprint marks, the way she held herself with practiced stillness, making herself small. "I was in the neighborhood," he said finally, which was obviously a lie. "I thought I'd introduce myself to Marcus. We've been meaning to meet." "About what?" "Business." "What kind of business?" A small smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The kind that keeps families safe." Emma's breath caught. There was something in the way he said it, something deliberate, that made her wonder if he meant Marcus's family or something else entirely. "I should go," she said, reaching for the cheaper chicken despite his advice, because the organic was $4 more, and Marcus would see the receipt and ask questions she didn't want to answer. Roman's hand moved faster than she expected, plucking the organic package and placing it in her cart before she could protest. "Consider it a gift, from one neighbor to another." "We're not neighbors." "We are now. I just purchased the house 3 doors down from yours." The package of chicken nearly slipped from her hands. "What?" "The Morrison place. They'd been wanting to relocate to Florida for years. I made them an offer they couldn't refuse." His expression was perfectly neutral, but something gleamed in those pale eyes. "So we'll be seeing more of each other, Emma." Her name. He'd used her first name, and the way he said it, like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth to see how it felt. It made something low in her stomach tighten, with a feeling she hadn't experienced in so long, she'd almost forgotten what it was. Want. Desire. The knowledge that a man was looking at her not as property or a punching bag, or a placeholder wife, but as a woman. "I really have to go." She abandoned her cart and walked quickly toward the exit, her heart hammering. She made it to her car before she realized she'd left everything behind, including the list Marcus had given her that morning, with strict instructions not to deviate from it. Her phone rang. Marcus. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. With shaking hands, she answered. "Hello? Where are you?" His voice was tight with irritation. "I just got a call from the bank." "Someone used our credit card at the grocery store. $47 at the grocery store, Emma. On organic chicken. What the hell are you thinking?" Her mind reeled. How had... But then she remembered the package Roman had put in her cart, and somehow he must have paid for it on her card, which meant he'd been close enough to see her credit card information, which meant... "I'm sorry," she said automatically, the apology so practiced it barely required thought. "I wasn't paying attention. I'll go back and exchange it." "You're damn right you will, and you can forget about going to that book club thing tonight. You clearly can't be trusted with simple tasks." The book club wasn't really a book club. It was 2 hours every Wednesday evening, where Emma sat in a coffee shop and pretended to read while actually just existing, in a space where no one would hurt her, where she could breathe without measuring every inhale, where she was just Emma, instead of Marcus's disappointing wife. "Please," she heard herself say, "I'll fix the chicken thing. I promise. But I've been looking forward to book club all week and... No." His voice was flat, final. "You want to waste money. You deal with the consequences. Be home when I get there at 6. And Emma, that bruise better be covered up. We're having dinner with my parents on Friday, and I won't have you embarrassing me." He hung up. Emma sat in her car in the grocery store parking lot and did something she rarely allowed herself to do. She cried. Not the silent tears she'd mastered, the ones that wouldn't wake Sophie or alert Marcus, but real sobs that shook her shoulders and made her gasp for air. A tap on her window made her jump. Roman stood there holding her abandoned shopping cart, his expression unreadable. For a moment they just looked at each other through the glass. Then slowly she rolled down the window, wiping at her face with trembling hands. "I paid for everything on your list," he said quietly. "With cash. Your husband won't see the charge." "How did you... I saw your list on top of the cart. It wasn't difficult." He paused. "The organic chicken was my addition. I'll deal with any consequences from that." You can't do things like this. You'll make everything worse." "Will I?" He leaned down, bringing himself closer to her eye level. Close enough that she could see flecks of darker gray in his pale eyes, like storm clouds gathering. Or have things already been as bad as they can get, Emma, and you've just been surviving it for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to have someone on your side? Her breath caught. You don't know anything about my life. I know your daughter asks why you're always crying. I know you flinch when your husband moves too quickly. I know you apologize for things that aren't your fault and make yourself small in your own home. His voice was still quiet, conversational even, but there was steel underneath it. I know that bruise on your face is new, but the ones hidden under your sleeves aren't. Emma's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Why do you care? It was the wrong question, or maybe the right one, because something shifted in his expression, something almost vulnerable before his mask of control slid back into place. Show me, he said instead of answering. What? Your daughter asked why you're always crying. Show me who makes you cry, Emma. Show me what you're afraid of. Give me names, dates, evidence. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, setting it on the edge of her window. And I'll make it stop. I can't. The words were barely a whisper. Sophie needs her father. I can't afford to leave. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have... You have me. 2 words. That was all it took to make her world tilt sideways. I don't understand, she managed. You don't even know me. Why would you... Because I've spent my entire life around men who hurt people, Roman said, his voice rough now, the control slipping just enough to let her see something raw underneath. Men who use power as an excuse for cruelty. Men who think that fear is the same as respect. He straightened, putting distance between them again. I've been those men sometimes. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I have one rule, Emma. One line I won't cross, and I won't tolerate others crossing. We don't hurt women. We don't hurt children. And we sure as hell don't let other men do it either. Emma stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was offering. You're talking about what? Threatening Marcus? Hurting him? I'm talking about protecting you. How that happens depends on what you need. This is insane. You can't just show up in someone's life and... Emma. The way he said her name again made her stop mid-sentence. Take the card. Think about it. And when you're ready, if you're ready, call me. Anytime, day or night. I'll answer. He picked up one of the grocery bags from her cart and handed it through the window, then took the rest and placed them in her trunk, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if he helped terrified women in grocery store parking lots every day. Maybe he did. What did she know about men like Roman Volkov, except what she'd heard in whispers? That he was ruthless, that he made people disappear, that crossing him was the last mistake anyone ever made. But when he returned to her window, there was nothing ruthless in his expression. Go home, cook dinner, pretend everything is normal. And Emma? He leaned close again. Cover that bruise. But remember it's there. Remember every bruise, every tear, every moment you've been made to feel small. You're going to need that anger later. Then he was gone, walking across the parking lot to a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Emma had made in her entire life, leaving her sitting in her sensible sedan with a business card that felt like it was burning a hole in her lap and a question echoing in her mind. What if she said yes? Emma made it through dinner with Marcus that night by doing what she always did, becoming invisible. She served his favorite meal, kept her voice soft, agreed with everything he said, and when he criticized the way she'd seasoned the chicken, she apologized and promised to do better next time. Sophie picked at her food, unusually quiet, her eyes moving between her parents with an expression too knowing for a 4-year-old. Eat your vegetables, Sophie, Marcus said without looking up from his phone. I don't like broccoli. Then you don't like dessert either. Sophie's lower lip trembled, but she picked up her fork. Emma wanted to intervene, to say that one night without vegetables wouldn't kill their daughter, but she'd learned that contradiction only made things worse. For everyone. After dinner, Emma gave Sophie a bath and read her 3 bedtime stories, stretching out the ritual as long as she could, delaying the inevitable moment when she'd have to go back downstairs to Marcus. "Mommy?" Sophie asked as Emma tucked her in. "Is the man from last night going to come back?" Emma's hand stilled on the blanket. "I don't know, baby. Why?" "Because he looked at Daddy the way Daddy looks at you. Like he wanted to hurt him. Sophie, I'm glad." Sophie's voice was small but fierce. "I'm glad someone wants to hurt Daddy like he hurts you." Emma felt her heart break all over again. "Sweetie, violence isn't the answer. We don't wish harm on people, even when they've done wrong. But Daddy wishes harm on you all the time. I hear him." What could she say to that? How could she explain to her 4-year-old daughter that sometimes people stayed in situations that hurt them because they were afraid, because they had no money of their own, because they worried about custody battles and legal fees, and the 1,000 ways that leaving could be worse than staying? "I love you," Emma whispered instead, pressing a kiss to Sophie's forehead. "More than anything in this world. And I promise, one day things will be better." When? Soon. It was a lie. She knew it was a lie. But it was the only thing she could offer. Downstairs, Marcus was waiting in their bedroom, and Emma's stomach dropped when she saw the expression on his face. "Close the door." She did, her hand shaking on the knob. "I did some asking around today," Marcus said, his voice deceptively calm. "About our visitor last night." "Do you know what I learned, Emma?" She shook her head. "Roman Volkov is not a man my father does business with. He's a man my father pays protection money to. He's a criminal. He's dangerous. And for some reason, he's taken an interest in my family." Marcus stood, crossing the room until he was close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "So I'm going to ask you once, and you're going to tell me the truth. Have you had any contact with him before last night?" "No." The word came out steady despite her fear. "I'd never heard of him before he showed up at our door." "But you saw him today?" Her blood turned to ice. "What?" "At the grocery store. Don't lie to me, Emma. I have friends everywhere, and one of them saw you talking to him in the parking lot. Saw him loading groceries into your car like some kind of..." His hand shot out, gripping her chin hard enough to make her gasp. "What did he want?" "Nothing. He was shopping, and we ran into each other, and he was being polite." "Roman Volkov is never just polite." Marcus's grip tightened. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing." "I swear, Marcus, we barely spoke. I don't know what he wants." "Then why did he buy that house 3 doors down? Why is he suddenly so interested in our neighborhood, in our family, in my wife?" Emma couldn't answer because she was asking herself the same questions. Marcus released her roughly, and she stumbled back against the dresser. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice dropping to the dangerous quiet that always preceded the worst violence. "Whatever game Roman Volkov is playing, you're not going to be part of it. You don't speak to him. You don't look at him. If he approaches you, you walk away. Do you understand? Yes. Because if I find out you've been talking to him, if I find out you've so much as smiled in his direction..." He didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. That night, Emma lay awake long after Marcus's breathing evened out into sleep, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Roman's card, which she'd hidden in her tampon box, because it was the one place Marcus would never look. "Show me who makes you cry." The problem was that Roman already knew. He'd seen it with his own eyes. The question wasn't whether Emma would show him what was happening. The question was whether she was brave enough to let him do something about it. 3 days passed. Emma didn't call the number on the card, but she didn't throw it away either. She went about her routine, dropping Sophie at preschool, running errands, preparing meals, making herself invisible, while feeling like something inside her was winding tighter and tighter, a spring compressed past its breaking point. She saw Roman twice during those 3 days. Once at the coffee shop that hosted her book club, sitting in the corner with a laptop and what looked like legitimate paperwork, though she suspected he was there because he knew she'd be there. And once in his driveway 3 houses down, loading boxes from a moving truck, domestic and normal except for the 2 men who were clearly security detail hovering nearby. He didn't approach her either time. He just looked at her, those pale eyes meeting hers with a question she couldn't bring herself to answer. Not yet. Friday came, and with it the dinner at Marcus's parents' house that Emma had been dreading. She spent an hour on her makeup, carefully concealing the fading bruise and the new fingerprint marks on her jaw. She dressed in the conservative navy dress Marcus had picked out, styled her hair the way his mother preferred, and practiced her smile in the mirror until it looked almost genuine. "You look acceptable," Marcus said when she came downstairs. "Not pretty, not beautiful, acceptable. Remember, my mother is still upset about last month. Last month, when Emma had accidentally mentioned in conversation that she'd once wanted to go to art school, and Marcus's mother had spent 20 minutes explaining why artistic ambitions were a sign of instability and poor breeding. "I'll be careful," Emma promised. Sophie was staying with a babysitter, which was both a relief and a worry. Emma hated leaving her daughter, but she also didn't want Sophie exposed to Marcus's parents more than necessary. They were where he'd learned that power meant dominance, that love was conditional, that showing weakness was unforgivable. The dinner was exactly as terrible as Emma had anticipated. Marcus's father spent the first course talking about a business deal that had fallen through, somehow making it about how Marcus needed to be more aggressive in his approach. His mother criticized everything from Emma's weight, too thin, she looked sickly, to her contribution to the conversation. Too quiet. What would people think? Emma endured it all with her practiced smile, eating food she couldn't taste, nodding at the right moments, making herself smaller and smaller, until she wondered if she might disappear entirely. "I hear Roman Volkov bought property in your neighborhood," Marcus's father said during dessert, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus's hand tightened on his fork. "Yes." "Interesting? Very interesting." The older man's eyes gleamed with something calculating. "That's quite a prestigious address for a man of his background." "What are you implying, Dad?" "Nothing at all. Just that Volkov doesn't do anything without reason. If he's chosen to establish a presence in your area, he's either making a statement or planning something. I'd be careful, son. Men like that don't make good neighbors." "I'm aware. Are you?" His father leaned back, studying Marcus with obvious disappointment. "Because I've heard rumors that he's been seen speaking with Emma." Emma's blood turned to ice. Marcus's hand moved so fast she didn't have time to flinch. His fingers clamped around her wrist under the table, squeezing hard enough to make her bite back a gasp. "That's been addressed," Marcus said tightly. "Has it? Because if Roman Volkov is taking an interest in your wife, you need to shut that down immediately. We can't afford to have him digging into our family business." "There are too many things that wouldn't stand up to scrutiny." Emma's mind raced. What things? What business? Marcus worked in his father's real estate development company, but she'd always assumed it was legitimate. Unless... "I said it's been addressed." Marcus released her wrist and stood abruptly. "Emma isn't feeling well. I think we should go." His mother sniffed. "Of course she isn't. She barely ate anything. Probably one of those ridiculous diets. We're leaving. Thank you for dinner." The drive home was silent and terrifying. Emma could feel Marcus's rage building, could see it in the white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, the tension in his jaw, the way he took turns too fast and ran a red light that made her grab the door handle. "Marcus, please slow down." "Shut up." "You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He jerked the wheel suddenly, pulling into an empty parking lot instead of heading home. "My father thinks I can't control my own wife. He thinks Roman Volkov is making a fool of me. He thinks—" "I haven't done anything!" Emma's voice cracked. "I've barely spoken to him. I've done everything you asked. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, her cheek exploding in pain, and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. "You're lying." Marcus's voice was cold now, deadly calm. "You must have done something, said something. given him some reason to think he could use you against me. I didn't. Another slap, harder this time. Emma's vision blurred with tears, but she forced them back because crying would only make him angrier. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, gripping her face and forcing her to look at him. Tomorrow, you're going to take Sophie and visit your mother for a few weeks. Get out of town until this blows over. I'll tell people you're not feeling well, that you need rest, and you're going to stay away from Roman Volkov and keep your mouth shut about our marriage. Understood? Emma wanted to point out that her mother had been dead for 3 years. She wanted to ask where exactly he expected her to go, but the look in Marcus's eyes told her that questioning him right now would be a very bad idea. Understood, she whispered. He released her roughly and started the car again. Emma sat frozen in her seat, her face throbbing, her mind spinning. He wanted to send her away. He wanted her gone, out of sight, where she couldn't embarrass him or attract unwanted attention from men like Roman Volkov. And maybe that was her chance. Maybe that was the opening she'd been too afraid to take. When they got home, Marcus went straight to his office, slamming the door behind him. Emma paid the babysitter with shaking hands and checked on Sophie, who was sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of the chaos swirling around her. Then Emma locked herself in the bathroom and pulled out Roman's card with trembling fingers. She stared at it for a long moment, her reflection in the mirror showing a woman with a swelling cheek and split lip, a woman who barely recognized herself anymore, a woman who was so tired of being afraid. Show me who makes you cry. Her fingers found her phone. She typed in the number before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang once before he answered. Emma. Just her name, said with such certainty, like he'd been waiting for her call, like he'd known exactly when she'd break. He hit me. The words came out flat, emotionless, shock dulling the sharp edges. In the car? After dinner with his parents. He hit me, and he's sending me away tomorrow. And I can't. Where are you? Home. In the bathroom. He's in his office, and Sophie's asleep, and Emma. His voice was firm, grounding. Listen to me carefully. Can you and Sophie leave right now? Quietly? I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have money. He controls everything. You have me. I'm 3 houses away. Take your daughter and walk to my door. Right now. He'll call the police. He'll say I kidnapped her. He won't. Trust me, Emma. He won't. There was something in Roman's voice, a certainty that made her want to believe him, even though everything in her life had taught her that men's promises were worthless. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice breaking. You don't owe me anything. You barely know me. Silence for a long moment. Then, quietly. When I was 7 years old, I watched my father beat my mother until she stopped moving. I hid in a closet and did nothing. I was too small, too weak, too scared. She survived, but something in her died that night. She left us a year later, and I never saw her again. Emma's breath caught. I swore that if I ever had the power to stop what happened to her from happening to someone else, I would, no matter what, no matter who. His voice roughened. So yes, Emma, I barely know you. But I know what you're living through, and I know what your daughter is watching, and I know that if you stay, one day Marcus is going to go too far. And I can't. He stopped, composing himself. I won't stand by and watch that happen. Not again. Never again. Tears were streaming down Emma's face now, hot and fast and unstoppable. Okay. Okay? Okay, we'll come. Just give me 10 minutes to pack a bag and get Sophie. I'll be waiting at my door. Emma? Yes? You're not going back to him. I promise you that. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, you're not going back. She ended the call and stood for a moment staring at her reflection. The scared woman staring back at her had been beaten down so many times she'd forgotten how to stand up. But underneath the fear, underneath the years of conditioning and control, there was still a spark of the girl who'd once dreamed of art school and adventure and a life bigger than these walls. That girl deserved better. Sophie deserved better. Emma moved quickly, quietly. She grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and threw in clothes for herself and Sophie, toiletries, Sophie's favorite stuffed rabbit. She took her laptop and the folder of documents she'd been slowly copying over the past year, bank statements, emails, photos of bruises she'd documented in her darker moments when she thought about leaving, but never had the courage. Show me who makes you cry. Well, here it was, everything she needed to show him exactly what her marriage had been. She woke Sophie gently, pressing a finger to her lips when her daughter started to speak. "We're going on an adventure," Emma whispered, "but we have to be very, very quiet. Can you do that?" Sophie, bless her, nodded seriously. She let Emma dress her in warm clothes and shoes, let her mother carry her and the bag downstairs, staying silent even though Emma could see the questions in her eyes. The office door was still closed. Emma could hear Marcus on the phone, his voice rising and falling in agitation. Talking to his father, probably, strategizing how to handle the Roman Volkov problem. They slipped out the front door into the cool night air. Emma's heart hammered so hard, she thought it might burst from her chest. Every step down the driveway felt like an eternity. Every rustle of leaves made her want to run. Sophie clung to her neck, silent and trusting, and Emma sent up a prayer to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Please let this work. Please let us be safe. 3 houses down, Roman's front door opened before they reached it. He stood backlit by warm interior light, still dressed in dark slacks and a button-down shirt, looking solid and real and safe, in a way that made Emma's knees go weak with relief. "Come inside," he said quietly. Emma crossed the threshold and heard the door close behind her with a soft click that sounded like a prison door opening rather than closing. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd left. Roman's house was nothing like Emma expected. She'd imagined something cold and modern, all sharp edges and expensive furniture that nobody actually used. Instead, she found herself in a space that was warm, comfortable, lived in. Dark hardwood floors, deep leather furniture, built-in bookshelves filled with actual books that looked read rather than decorative. A kitchen visible through an archway with copper pots hanging above a professional-grade stove. Art on the walls, real art, originals, not the generic prints Marcus's decorator had chosen for their house. "The guest room is upstairs," Roman said, his voice gentle. "Second door on the left. There are fresh sheets on the bed. Take whatever time you need." Sophie had fallen back asleep against Emma's shoulder, dead weight in the way only sleeping children could be. Emma nodded, suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline that had carried her here draining away and leaving her hollow. Roman led them upstairs, opening the door to a spacious room decorated in soft blues and grays. A queen bed with a fluffy duvet, an adjoining bathroom, even a small sitting area with a reading chair and lamp. "Thank you," Emma whispered, laying Sophie gently on the bed and tucking the duvet around her. "Rest," Roman said from the doorway. "We'll talk in the morning." But as he turned to leave, Emma heard herself say, "Wait." He paused, looking back at her. "Why do you live alone?" The question came out before she could stop it, fueled by exhaustion and shock and the strange intimacy of being in his home. "A house this size, but it's just you?" Something flickered across his face. "I had a wife once. She left. Couldn't handle the reality of who I am, what I do." He shrugged, but there was pain underneath the casual gesture. "Some people aren't meant for the life I lead. I stopped trying to prove otherwise. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made the right choice. This world, my world, it's not kind to innocence." His pale eyes found hers, which is why I need to ask you, Emma, now that you're here, now that you've taken this step, are you prepared for what comes next? I don't understand. Marcus won't let you go easily. Men like him never do. And when he realizes you're here, with me, Roman's jaw tightened. It's going to get ugly. Dangerous, possibly. I can protect you, but I need to know you're committed. That you won't change your mind and go back to him when he apologizes, and promises to change. Emma looked at Sophie sleeping peacefully on the bed, at her daughter's face relaxed in a way it never was at home, where even sleep couldn't fully erase the tension of living with fear. "I'm not going back," she said firmly. "Whatever happens, whatever he threatens or promises or does, I'm not going back. Sophie asked me why I'm always crying, Roman. My 4-year-old daughter shouldn't have to ask that question." "No," he agreed quietly. "She shouldn't. So what do we do? First you sleep, then tomorrow we build your case. Divorce, custody, restraining order, all of it. I have lawyers, good ones, who specialize in cases like yours. We'll document everything, file everything, and we'll make sure Marcus has no legal leg to stand on. He'll fight. His family has money, connections. So do I." Roman's voice was steel. "And unlike his family, I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. Marcus's father is paying protection money to some of my associates. That gives me leverage. The police chief owes me favors. The family court judge plays poker at my club. I'm not saying this to scare you, Emma. I'm saying it so you understand that you're not alone anymore. You have resources now. You have power." Emma felt something unfurl in her chest, something that might have been hope. "I don't know how to repay you for this." "I don't want repayment. I want you safe. I want your daughter to stop asking why her mother cries." He stepped closer, and Emma's breath caught as he gently touched the bruise on her cheek, his fingers feather-light. "I want to make sure Marcus never touches you again." The way he said it, quiet and absolute, sent a shiver down her spine. Not fear this time. Something else. Something that made her acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his hand still hovering near her face, of the intensity in his pale eyes. "Get some rest," Roman said, dropping his hand and stepping back. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything." After he left, Emma stood for a long moment, processing everything that had happened in the past few hours. She'd walked out on her marriage. She'd taken her daughter and run to a man she barely knew, a man who was apparently some kind of criminal, a man who had promised to protect her, with a certainty that should have been frightening, but instead felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in years. She climbed into bed next to Sophie, wrapping her arms around her daughter, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Emma fell asleep without crying. She woke to sunshine streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of her daughter's laughter. Emma bolted upright, heart racing, before remembering where she was. Roman's house. They were safe. Sophie's laughter came again from somewhere downstairs, followed by a deeper voice responding. Emma threw on a robe she found hanging in the bathroom and hurried downstairs, following the sounds to the kitchen where she stopped in the doorway, stunned. Roman stood at the stove, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that showed off a physique Emma hadn't fully appreciated under his suits, flipping pancakes while Sophie sat on the counter beside him, chattering away without a trace of the fear she usually showed around adults. And then the rabbit said, "Mommy!" Sophie spotted her and waved. "Roman's making pancakes. He put chocolate chips in them." "Chocolate chips?" Emma moved into the kitchen, still processing the surreal domesticity of the scene. "I figured if we're breaking rules, we might as well break them properly." Roman glanced at her, and something in his expression softened. "Coffee's ready." "There's ibuprofen on the counter for your face." Only then did Emma realize how much her cheek still hurt. She took the offered medication gratefully, washing it down with coffee that was perfectly brewed, strong and smooth. "Sophie was just telling me about her favorite books," Roman said, sliding pancakes onto plates. "Apparently we have similar taste. I'm partial to dragons, too." "You like dragons?" Sophie asked, delighted. "I have a whole collection of dragon stories. Maybe later we can look at them together." Emma watched this exchange, something in her chest going tight. When was the last time an adult man had spoken to Sophie with genuine interest instead of dismissive tolerance? When had Marcus ever made their daughter breakfast, or asked about her favorite books? They ate at the kitchen island, Sophie chattering between bites about everything from her preschool friends to the squirrel she'd seen in Roman's backyard. Roman listened attentively, asking questions and making Sophie giggle with his responses, and Emma felt tears prickling her eyes again. This was what it should have been like. This ease, this safety, this feeling of family. After breakfast, Roman set Sophie up in the living room with a tablet and what was indeed an impressive collection of dragon books, then gestured for Emma to follow him to a study off the main hall. The room was exactly what she'd expect. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk with multiple monitors. But what caught her attention was the folder already sitting on the desk, thick with papers. "I made some calls this morning," Roman said, closing the door behind them. "My lawyers can meet with us tomorrow, but I need to know everything, Emma. Every detail, no matter how small. Every time he hit you, every threat, every form of control. Can you do that?" Emma nodded, pulling the documents she'd brought from her duffel bag. "I have some of it documented. Photos, emails, bank statements showing how he controlled the finances." Roman's expression darkened as he looked through what she'd brought. "How long has this been going on?" "It started about a year after we got married. Small things at first, criticizing my clothes, my friends, how I spent money. Then he convinced me to quit my job because it would be better for Sophie to have me home full-time. After that, I was completely dependent on him financially." She swallowed hard. "The physical violence started when I was pregnant with Sophie. He pushed me during an argument and I fell. He apologized, said it was an accident, promised it would never happen again. But it did. It always does, doesn't it?" Emma's voice was bitter. "I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I was a better wife, if I didn't provoke him. Emma." Roman's hand covered hers on the desk, warm and solid. "Nothing you did provoked him. This isn't your fault. Men who hurt their partners don't do it because of something their partner did wrong. They do it because they enjoy power and control. Is that what you do?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Your world? You said it's not kind to innocence. You said you've done things you're not proud of. Do you hurt people to feel powerful?" He didn't look away from her challenging gaze. "Yes, sometimes. But there's a difference between the violence I do and what Marcus does to you. I hurt people who've made choices, who've entered my world knowing the risks. People who are trying to hurt others, who are dealing in human misery. I don't hurt people who can't fight back. I don't terrorize my family. That's a fine line. It's the only line that matters." They stared at each other for a long moment, and Emma felt something shift between them, some acknowledgement of the complicated reality they were navigating. Roman wasn't a good man in the traditional sense, but he was good to her, good to Sophie, and right now, that was what mattered. "So, what happens now?" she asked. "Now we build a case that makes it impossible for Marcus to get custody or come near you. Then we file for divorce and a restraining order. My lawyers will expedite everything. Within a week, maybe 2, you'll have legal protection. And in the meantime, you stay here. Both of you. I have security, cameras, people watching. Marcus won't get near you." "He's going to be furious." Emma felt fear curl in her stomach. "When he realizes we're gone, when he figures out we're here, let him be furious." Roman's voice was cold, controlled. "Let him show his true colors. Angry men make mistakes, Emma, and I'm counting on Marcus making a big one." Marcus made his mistake that very afternoon. Emma was upstairs reading to Sophie when she heard raised voices from downstairs. Her blood ran cold as she recognized her husband's voice, loud and aggressive, demanding to see his wife and daughter. "Stay here," she told Sophie, pressing the book into her daughter's hands. "Don't come downstairs no matter what you hear, okay?" Sophie's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded. Emma crept to the top of the stairs, her heart hammering. "My wife and child, and I know they're here," Marcus was shouting. "You have no right to keep them from me." "I'm not keeping anyone from you." Roman's voice was infuriatingly calm. "Your wife made a choice to leave. Your daughter is with her mother. That's not kidnapping. That's a woman exercising her right to leave an abusive marriage." "Abusive?" Are you insane? I've never— Emma! Marcus's voice rose to a roar. Emma, get down here right now! We're going home! Emma found herself moving down the stairs before she could think about it, some conditioned response to that tone overriding her fear. But as she descended, she saw the scene unfolding in Roman's foyer. Marcus stood just inside the front door, his face red with rage, his hands clenched into fists. Roman stood between him and the stairs, relaxed but alert, his body language that of a predator who knew exactly how dangerous he was. And behind Roman, positioned strategically, were two other men Emma had seen loading boxes from the moving truck. Security, definitely, and judging by their expressions, they were hoping Marcus would try something. Emma? Marcus's voice changed when he saw her, becoming wheedling, manipulative. Baby, what are you doing? Why are you here? Come home. Sophie needs her own bed, her routine. This is insane. No. The word came out stronger than Emma expected. I'm not coming home, Marcus. I'm leaving you. I'm filing for divorce. His face went from red to purple. You can't leave me. You have no money, no job. No, she has me. Roman's voice cut through Marcus's tirade like a knife. She has my lawyers, my resources, my protection. And she has documentation of every time you put your hands on her, every bruise, every threat. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You're going to leave my house. You're going to leave Emma and Sophie alone, and you're going to wait to hear from her lawyers about the divorce proceedings. You don't tell me what to do! Marcus started forward, and everything happened very fast. Roman moved, positioning himself more firmly between Marcus and Emma. The two security men closed in, and Marcus, faced with three men who were clearly trained and dangerous, made the worst possible choice. He lunged at Roman. What happened next took maybe 5 seconds but seemed to unfold in slow motion. Roman stepped aside smoothly, redirecting Marcus's momentum. One of the security men caught Marcus's arm, twisting it behind his back. Marcus yelped in pain and rage, struggling, and Roman pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police, he said calmly, for attempted assault, trespassing, and violation of domestic peace. They'll be here in 3 minutes. You can explain to them why you forced your way into my home and tried to attack me. You can't. I'll tell them you're keeping my family hostage. Emma? Roman looked at her, his pale eyes steady. Are you here against your will? No. Her voice was shaking but clear. I came here voluntarily. You're protecting us. And Sophie? Is she being held against her will? She's with me. Where she belongs. Marcus thrashed against the hold on him, his face contorted with rage, and Emma saw him clearly for the first time. Not as the man she'd married, not as Sophie's father, but as exactly what Roman had called him. A man who enjoyed power and control, who was furious that his property had dared to develop a will of its own. You'll regret this, Marcus snarled at her. Both of you. You have no idea who you're dealing with. My family will destroy you. We'll take Sophie. We'll make sure you never see her again. You'll end up with nothing, Emma. Nothing. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Roman's expression didn't change. I think we're done here. The police arrived and took statements. Emma showed them the photos of her bruises, the documentation she'd been keeping. She explained calmly that she'd left her husband due to domestic violence, and that he'd forced his way into Roman's house, threatening them. Marcus tried to spin it differently, tried to claim he was just a concerned father, but the evidence was against him. And when the police checked Roman's security footage, which clearly showed Marcus shoving his way past Roman when the door opened, showed him making aggressive movements toward Emma on the stairs, showed him taking a swing at Roman. Well, that was that. They arrested Marcus for assault and trespassing, put him in handcuffs, and led him to their car while he shouted threats about lawyers and ruined lives. Emma watched from Roman's doorway. Sophie clutched in her arms and felt something break free inside her chest. Fear, maybe? Or the chains that had kept her bound to a man who'd made her life a prison. It's over, she whispered. Not quite, Roman said beside her. "He'll make bail tonight, probably. His family will hire expensive lawyers. There will be court dates and custody battles But I'm not going back to him." "No." Roman's hand found the small of her back, steady and warm. "You're never going back to him." The legal process was every bit as complicated as Roman had warned. Marcus's family did hire expensive lawyers. There were depositions and mediation sessions and court appearances. Marcus played the victim beautifully, claiming Emma had been seduced by a criminal, that she'd abandoned her marriage for money and excitement, that she was an unfit mother. But Emma had Roman's lawyers, who were better. They had documentation of years of abuse. They had testimony from Sophie's pediatrician about concerning behaviors. They had the security footage of Marcus's assault. And they had something else, evidence that Marcus's family business wasn't quite as legitimate as it appeared, evidence that Roman's people had dug up about offshore accounts and suspicious transactions that made Marcus's father very motivated to settle quietly. 3 months after Emma walked out her front door, the divorce was finalized. Emma got primary custody of Sophie, child support, alimony, and a restraining order that kept Marcus at least 500 feet away from both of them. She also got something she hadn't expected: herself back. Living in Roman's house those 3 months had been strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. He'd given her space to heal. Time to figure out who she was without Marcus's voice in her head, telling her she was worthless. He'd helped Sophie adjust to the new normal, had been patient and kind, and so careful never to overstep the boundaries Emma was still learning to set. But he'd also been present. When Emma woke from nightmares, he was there with tea and conversation. When Sophie had a bad day at her new school, he knew exactly how to make her laugh. When Emma broke down crying over paperwork, or memories, or the sheer overwhelming nature of rebuilding her life, he held her without judgment. And somewhere in those 3 months, Emma had fallen in love with him. It wasn't the breathless, naive love she'd felt for Marcus when they first met. It was deeper, more real, built on respect and trust, and the knowledge that Roman had seen her at her absolute worst, broken and afraid and ashamed, and had chosen to stand beside her anyway. The problem was that Emma had no idea if Roman felt the same way. He was protective, yes. He was kind. He clearly cared about Sophie. But care wasn't love, and protectiveness wasn't romance, and Emma had learned the hard way not to assume anything about a man's feelings. So she said nothing. She looked for a job, made plans to eventually move out to her own place, tried to rebuild a life that didn't revolve around dependence on a man, even a man as good as Roman. It was Sophie who finally forced the issue. "Mommy," she asked one night at dinner, a week after the divorce was finalized, "is Roman going to be my new daddy?" Emma choked on her water. Roman's fork paused halfway to his mouth. They stared at each other across the table while Sophie looked between them with the innocent curiosity only a 4-year-old could manage. "Sophie, we haven't," Emma stumbled over the words, her face heating. "Because I want him to be," Sophie continued matter-of-factly. "He's nice. He doesn't yell. He makes you smile instead of cry. And he said I could have a puppy if you said it was okay." "He said what?" Roman had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "We were at the park last week, and there was a dog adoption event. The conversation may have come up." The conversation about getting a puppy, or the conversation about being Sophie's father? Emma's voice came out sharper than she intended, defensive and scared, and hoping for something she didn't dare name. "Both, actually." Roman set down his fork, his pale eyes meeting hers with that intensity that still made her breath catch. "Sophie asked if I would stay in her life after you moved out. I told her that was up to her mother." "But I want you to stay," Sophie said, sliding out of her chair and moving to Roman's side, taking his hand with the easy trust that still amazed Emma. "I want you both. I want us to be a real family." "Sophie, honey, it's not that simple." "Why not?" her daughter asked. And it was such a reasonable question, so purely logical in the way only children could be, that Emma found herself without an answer. "Because I'm a complicated man," Roman said quietly, looking at Sophie with unmistakable affection. "Because I do difficult things sometimes. Because your mom deserves a chance to build her own life without depending on anyone, even me." But what if she doesn't want to build a life without you? Emma heard herself ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Roman's gaze snapped to hers. What if she's realized over the past 3 months that the life she wants, the life she's always wanted, is the one she's been living here, in this house, with you? Emma's heart was hammering, but the words kept coming. 3 months of unspoken feelings finally breaking free. What if she's fallen in love with a man who reads dragon stories to her daughter and makes chocolate chip pancakes and treats her like she matters, like her opinion matters, like she's not property or a burden but a partner? The silence stretched between them, Sophie looking back and forth with wide eyes. What if, Roman said slowly, standing and moving around the table until he was close enough that Emma had to tilt her head back to look at him. He's been in love with her since the day in the grocery store parking lot, when she looked at him with those scared, defiant eyes, and asked why he cared. Emma's breath caught. Roman, what if he's spent 3 months trying to be honorable, trying to give her space to heal, trying not to take advantage of her vulnerability, when all he really wanted was to tell her that she's the strongest, most incredible woman he's ever met? His hand came up, cupping her face with heartbreaking gentleness. What if he's been waiting for her to be ready, Emma, because she deserves a man who waits, who puts her needs first, who understands that love isn't about possession, but choice? Tears were streaming down Emma's face now, but they were good tears, happy tears, tears of relief and joy and overwhelming emotion. I choose you, she whispered. I choose this. I choose us. Roman kissed her then, soft and careful and reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Emma melted into it, into him, into the safety and warmth and rightness of being held by a man who had proven over and over that he would protect her, not because he owned her, but because he loved her. Ew, kissing, Sophie's voice broke through, and they pulled apart, laughing, to find her daughter covering her eyes, but peeking through her fingers with a huge grin. Sorry, sweetheart, Roman said, not sounding sorry at all. You asked if I was going to be your new daddy. That means your mom and I are going to do some kissing sometimes. Can we get the puppy now? Sophie, Emma protested, but she was laughing, actually laughing. The sound strange and wonderful because it had been so long since she'd felt this light. We can talk about the puppy, Roman said diplomatically. But first, I think your mom and I need to have a serious conversation about some other things. He sent Sophie off to watch a movie, then led Emma to his study, the room where they'd planned her divorce, built her case, mapped out her path to freedom. But now, instead of sitting across the desk from her, Roman pulled her down onto the leather couch beside him, keeping her hand in his. I meant what I said, he started. I love you, Emma, but I need you to understand what that means. I'm not going to suddenly become a different person. I'm still who I am, what I am. My business isn't always legal. I have enemies. There's danger in my world. I know. Do you? Because it's one thing to accept my help when you're desperate. It's another thing to choose to build a life with me knowing that there might be consequences, that Sophie might have security following her to school, that there might be nights when I come home late with blood on my knuckles, that Emma pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. Stop. I'm not naive, Roman. I've spent 3 months in your house, around your people. I've seen enough to know what you do, even if you try to shield me from the details. And yes, it scares me sometimes. But you know what scares me more? The idea of trying to live without you. The idea of teaching Sophie that we should run from people who are complicated, instead of loving them for who they are. Roman pulled her fingers away from his mouth, kissing them instead. You deserve simple, Emma. You deserve easy. I deserve to choose, and I choose this. I choose you. Complicated, dangerous, whatever. I choose you. He studied her face for a long moment, and Emma saw the exact instant he stopped fighting against what he wanted and let himself believe it was possible. Marry me, he said. Emma's breath caught. What? Marry me. Not now. Not until you're ready. Not until you're sure. But someday. Eventually. When the memory of Marcus has faded, And you know with absolute certainty that this is what you want. Marry me. Be my wife, my partner. Let me be Sophie's father in every way that matters. Let me build a life with you that's nothing like what you had before. Yes. The word came out without hesitation, without doubt. Yes, Roman. Yes to all of it. This time when he kissed her, it wasn't gentle. It was consuming, passionate, full of 3 months of restrained desire finally unleashed. Emma kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring into it everything she felt, everything she'd been too afraid to show. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never cry unless they're happy tears. That's a big promise. I'm a man who keeps my promises. He pulled back slightly, his pale eyes serious. Starting with this one. Anyone who tries to hurt you or Sophie will answer to me. Marcus, his family, anyone. They come near you. They'll regret it. Roman, I know you want to believe the legal system will protect you, and it will mostly. But the restraining order is just paper, Emma. Paper won't stop a desperate man, but I will. Always. There was something both frightening and deeply comforting in that promise. Emma knew she should probably object, should probably say something about not solving problems with violence, but she also knew that the world wasn't always kind to women who left dangerous men, that legal protection only went so far, that sometimes you needed someone who was willing to be dangerous back. Okay, she said softly, but only if you promise me something in return. Anything. Promise me you'll come home, that whatever you do out there in your world, you'll always come home to us. Because Sophie's already lost one father to violence and anger, and I won't let her lose another. Roman's expression softened. I promise. I've survived this long because I'm careful, Emma. Because I'm smart. I don't take unnecessary risks. And now that I have you, both of you, I have even more reason to be careful. They sat together for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, and Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years settle over her like a warm blanket. Peace, safety, home. 6 months later, Emma stood in Roman's backyard, their backyard now, watching Sophie play with the puppy they'd finally agreed to adopt. The yard had been transformed for the occasion, strung with white lights and filled with flowers, with a small gathering of people Emma had come to know as Roman's chosen family. Not his blood family, which was apparently complicated and mostly estranged, but his people, the men who worked for him, their wives and partners, a few genuine friends who looked past what Roman did for a living and saw who he was underneath. Emma wore a simple white dress and held a bouquet of wildflowers. Roman stood beside her in a dark suit, looking both dangerous and devastatingly handsome, his hand warm around hers. You're sure about this? He'd asked that morning. We can wait longer. There's no rush. But there was no reason to wait either. Emma was sure. She'd been sure for months. The divorce from Marcus was finalized. She'd found a part-time job at a local art gallery that let her use the skills she'd abandoned years ago. Sophie was thriving in her new school, making friends, laughing more than she cried, and Roman had kept every promise. He'd protected them. He'd provided for them without making Emma feel dependent. He'd loved them both fiercely and carefully, showing Sophie what a real father looked like, showing Emma what a real partner looked like. I'm sure, Emma had told him. I want to be your wife. Now, as an officiant spoke words about love and commitment and choosing each other every day, Emma looked at the man beside her and felt grateful for a daughter brave enough to ask questions, for a woman strong enough to run, and for a man who'd seen her tears and decided to make them stop. I do, Roman said when asked if he would take Emma as his wife. I do, Emma said, her voice clear and strong, no trace of the scared, broken woman from that grocery store parking lot 6 months ago. And when Roman kissed her, his wife now, legally and irrevocably, Sophie cheered from the front row, holding her puppy and beaming, and Emma tasted salt on both their lips. Happy tears, she realized, For the first time in years, she was crying happy tears. And she suspected, with a man like Roman by her side, there would be many more to come.